So welcome to your weekly podcast. It is a Friday for us today. It's a warm day as well if you're in the south of England. I hope you're enjoying the weather. It feels like summer is here. We're leaving this nice weather. I don't actually know the weather in Rwanda. I haven't actually looked, but it is an entirely different place, a long way away, and we'll be there sometime over the weekend. Obviously in Rwanda next week, Prince Charles is there for the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit. Rwanda's in the news for other reasons at the moment. If you're in the UK, you'll know all about the controversial government policy to send asylum seekers there. And it's not one that Prince Charles has managed to stay clear of, as royals are supposed to.
Yeah, there was a story that appeared first in the Times over the weekend about Prince Charles's comments on the policy, comments that he expressed several times in private but have been leaked to the newspapers, and he was said to have described the policy as appalling.
Yes, which were private meetings, so you might well say, well, Prince Charles is entitled to give private views in private meetings. You then got lots of stories doing the rounds about princes and whether they should be saying things about government policy.
We all know that members of the royal family have to remain strictly neutral when it comes to political matters, and the Queen has, we've said before on this podcast quite recently actually, with regards to the state opening of Parliament, we've often not known what the Queen has thought about a lot of things. She's reigned for so long but yet has managed to stay pretty like a blank canvas, didn't we describe it as? Whereas Charles, we know a lot more about what he thinks on a lot of matters, and now we know what he thinks about Rwanda too.
Yes, and therefore that's might create problems for him when he is king. Of course, that was one of the subjects I think that certain cabinet ministers spoke to the Sunday Times about a day after this report appeared, and that does create a problem.
Yeah, it wasn't just ministers that were criticising him. Well-known royal commentators also criticised him. Peter Hunt, who used to work for the BBC, wrote a piece in The Spectator saying that Charles was a man teetering on the edge of inheriting a unifying role as head of the nation, has entered a divisive debate very firmly on the side of Boris Johnson's opponents. One day, those occupying the roles of Prime Minister and Home Secretary will be devising immigration policy as members of His Majesty's government.
The thing is, though, if the Queen had any concerns about this policy, she could express them to the Prime Minister in her weekly audiences, which are private and no one ever gets to know what's been discussed or what words were used. And you could argue that Prince Charles was doing the same thing in private meetings as well. Clearly, they're not one-to-one meetings, and there were more than one person in the room, and they decided that this deserved to be in the public domain.
Yeah, I suppose that's the difference, isn't it? The audiences with the Prime Minister have always been private. It's a safe space where discussions can happen, and those discussions don't get leaked. Whereas the conversations Charles was having clearly weren't in a safe space. I should just read what Clarence House said at the weekend. We would not comment on supposed anonymous private conversations with the Prince of Wales, except to restate that he remains politically neutral. Matters of policy are decisions for government.
We should probably also point out that on the time of his 70th birthday, remember when Prince Charles made that documentary and he was asked about, will you be a campaigning king, or will you be a lot more like your mother? And he kind of said, didn't he, that, well, no, the two roles are very different. When I've got the other role, I won't be the same as the one I've had for many, many years. I mean, he's the longest serving Prince of Wales ever. And clearly you do need to create a role for yourself. And if you're going to talk about either rural issues or climate change or architecture or traditional crafts, you're going to come up against certain opponents, which is something that his mother's never done. But here we once again have a story about Prince Charles and what kind of king he might be.
Yeah, and I think, talking about the state opening of Parliament, we said, didn't we, when he was reading, it was still the Queen's speech, that that a lot we know a lot about what he thinks about matters that he's reading about in a way that
Yes.
we don't with the Queen.
You half expect him halfway through the speech to go, well, actually, I completely agree with that policy, and I think that's a very good idea. Next. That is I suppose that is the trouble, and that is the something we'll have to get used to when there is a change of reign in any case. But effectively, as we said at the very top, you've got these two stories colliding in Rwanda next week. Prince Charles arriving in the country for the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit, a country which is in the news for an entirely different reason. And these two stories are very much coming together. I mean, we were quite surprised, weren't we, when we had the briefing that no other member of the royal family has ever been to Rwanda before. This is the first ever visit, and they want to focus on looking at reconciliation after the genocide, the appalling genocide of 1994. Also looking at other environmental issues before he goes to Chogam and meets some of the 54 members of the Commonwealth. Heads of government, but you can kind of see the other Rwanda story kind of feeding in whatever way, shape, or form it's in. Obviously, we don't know by next week how many asylum seekers will or won't have been deported by this government. The first flight on Tuesday night had to be grounded because there weren't any left to send. To be fair, I think Prince Charles had a very busy weekend by all accounts, because you had this story on the Saturday, and then on the Sunday there were stories that Prince Andrew would quite happily have a return to public life at the Garter Day on Monday, and that all came to an abrupt halt on the Sunday evening when it appeared that Prince Charles and Prince William clearly thought otherwise and intervened to say to the Queen, what on earth is going on? Of course Prince Andrew can't go.
I know this was extraordinary, wasn't it? Like a real 11th hour U-turn on Prince Andrew's attendance. And I think we were surprised that he was ever going to be attending in a public capacity, to be honest. And right up until 10:30, 11 o'clock on Sunday night, before the Sun front page came out saying that he wasn't attending, we kept asking the question saying, he's definitely going. And the answer at that point, particularly from his team, was yes, he is.
Yeah, I mean, going, because there's different parts to Garter Day, isn't there? There's the sort of the public facing part, which is when all people walk past the public and in the cameras in their finery, and it's quite a spectacle, isn't it? I mean, if anyone doesn't know what the Garter Day is, basically it's the annual meeting of the Knights and Ladies of the Order of the Garter, which is the oldest order of chivalry in Britain. It dates back to 1348, a time of Edward III. But this perhaps was one of the more interesting Garter days, in that Prince Andrew, who is a Garter Knight, he was made one in 2006, thought he could join everyone else. He didn't have that knighthood removed from him, along with when he had his titles removed from him, and he obviously thought, well, I'm a Garter Knight, I can turn up and walk past the cameras. It could be the start of my re-entry into public life. I mean, you've got to ask, who on earth thought that was a good idea? Probably the same people who thought it was a good idea that he should go to the Commonwealth Day service and escort the Queen.
Yeah, so there are private elements to Garter Day, and then the public elements. So the private bits are there's a lunch and an investiture for those who are newly installed as royal ladies and knight companions of the Garter. And then the public bit is they all process down within the grounds of Windsor Castle to St George's Chapel. So Prince Andrew thought he was going to go to all the elements, walk down towards those cameras, as you say, before he went into St George's. But they did put the brakes on that, and he just ended up attending the private elements of the day.
As far as we understand, what happened was that, yes, the arrangements were made. Prince Andrew clearly got his mother's ear at some point and said, oh, can I come to a Garter today? What a jolly good idea that would be. And then Prince William and Prince Charles kicked off about it when it dawned on them. Perhaps they hadn't really looked at their diaries or looked at what was going on, but when it dawned on them that Prince Andrew was planning to attend, and they could see what would happen to the headlines if that were the case, then they intervened. So they kind of got to the, you might call it, right decision, but in a very messy way, and not without the story becoming much bigger than it would have been otherwise had Prince Andrew simply just not been there. But he did go to the, as you say, he went to the private bits of the service, didn't he? The lunch and the investiture. And it, interestingly, one of the new Garter Knights being installed was Tony Blair, and there was lots of protests outside the Stop the War Coalition, all there voicing their anger that Tony Blair was being knighted because they claim that he is a war criminal because of his role in the 2003 Second Gulf War. And yet the story on Monday was all about Prince Andrew and the fact that his brother and nephew intervenes to stop him attending.
And had he have attended those public elements, I think it would have distracted from what was actually an incredibly important day for the Duchess of Cornwall, who was installed as a royal lady of the Order of the Garter. And as you say, it's the most senior order of chivalry in Britain, and the Queen personally chooses the 24 knights or ladies in recognition of their work.
Yes, in service to the country or in service to her personally, isn't it? It was like Duke of Edinburgh was one, Prince Andrew was one, William and Charles are one. We all saw them walk in front of us in those robes. You can take your view on whether you think people should still be wearing hats with feathers coming out of them and long velvet robes. Nevertheless, they were.
But it's an important role for Camilla. It's sort of, in recognition of how highly regarded she is by the Queen. We know that the Queen, her view is now that she wants Camilla to become Queen Consort. This is another recognition of her role within the family. And I think if Prince Andrew had been there, it would have distracted from that day for Camilla.
Yeah, and there was a very nice picture, wasn't there, that the Buckingham Palace released in the evening, which you can see on our social media pages and Twitter and Instagram at ITV News Royals, which is of the Queen, Prince Charles and Camilla after the investiture, after Camilla was installed. And a lot of people picked up on the Queen having silver shoes and a silver handbag.
Oh yeah, she
and that was, unless that was just a bad flash on the camera, but it looked very silver to me.
It looked silver to me too.
Yes, and it was like she was just standing there with Charles on one side and Camilla on the other, and poking out from underneath her robes were her silver shoes, which seemed to amuse a lot of people.
She looked the part, didn't she?
Yeah, exactly. Although, I mean, also she looked quite frail, and actually, she didn't make the public part. I think last time we went to Garter Day, which was 2019, was it? And it's obviously had a couple of years off because of COVID. She drove to St George's Chapel and drove back again. Didn't do the processing, didn't do the walk.
So they walked. They walk down, don't they? And then there are carriages for the departure. And on this occasion, the Duchess of Cambridge and Countess of Wessex they entered St George's Chapel via the Galilee Porch, which is sort of a little bit up the hill from where the cameras were, and the procession comes past them, but they depart with their partners in the carriages. And so the Duchess of Cambridge,
there was that carriage, wasn't there, with Charles and Camilla, William and Kate in it. You do wonder what they were talking about,
yes,
whether Prince Andrew came up in conversations, they were cloppeting back up the hill.
Yeah, well, I think they probably saved that for another time.
They had a lot to discuss. Also, I mean, there were many members of the public going there, wasn't there? There was like all the lawns in front of St George's Chapel are crowded with members of the public. We're there obviously because we're working. I just wondered whether they saw enough, because you just get people walking down the hill and then you get them cloppeting back up again. Is it worth it?
I don't know. I think we take for granted, we see the royals day in, day out, and I think sometimes we take for granted how kind of special that is for people that don't get to do it on a daily basis. We often talk about the reaction that the royals get when they arrive, or at events or on public walkabouts, and people queue for hours to catch a glimpse of them. And it was a beautiful day, and they were in the grounds of Windsor Castle having picnics, and they got
worst places to be. Yeah,
quite an event. So I think probably if you ask them, yes, it was.
Yeah, we had, just before we went in, actually, we had a chat with Robert Hardman, who wrote the most recent biography of the Queen for her Platinum Jubilee, just about the whole Andrew affair and what he made of it. This is what Robert said to us shortly before the Garter Day got underway.
What's very clear is that although Prince Andrew had originally talked his way into this service, the broader family decided that was not the right way to go, and after whatever deliberations, Prince Andrew's been told not to come. I mean, he's on the order of service, so it's obviously a fairly late decision, but I think it shows what we're going to carry on seeing, which is as he attempts to make his comeback into public life, he's not just going to have to clear it with the Queen, he's going to have to clear it with other members of the family, and they may be a little less enthusiastic about the idea.
So your name is not down, you're not coming in, was the conclusion, well, at least as far as Prince Charles and Prince William were concerned. Interesting that he had to go and confront the Queen. It was Prince Charles that had to go and confront the Queen, I suppose, because he is the next most senior. But as one royal aide said to me, he had the hard work to do of actually going and telling the Queen, I think we should change the plans that you have signed off. And it does then raise questions. I mean, wasn't it Prince Harry? We all think that what Prince Harry was saying when he said the Queen was getting the wrong advice and didn't have the right people around her, was because those are the people that allowed Prince Andrew to accompany the Queen to the Commonwealth Day service. And actually, in hindsight, that's a very different affair, because that was for his father, who had, recently passed away. Who approved Prince Andrew going to this, thinking that this would be a good idea and wouldn't overshadow the entire event?
But you and I spoke to a former palace aide a few weeks ago, didn't we? And they were telling us how the Queen has always found it difficult to say no to her children. And I think this is probably a clear example of that. And it's taken, the Prince of Wales and Prince William with a bit of distance, with that, they're a little bit more removed than the Queen, to step in and say, no, this isn't going to work.
It really didn't work, did it? So it caused a lot of trouble, and actually overshadowed a protest outside Windsor Castle from the Stop the War Coalition. And the protest outside Windsor Castle was quite an unusual affair in itself. The fact that they were there would have been probably a very big story otherwise, but no, it was all about Prince Andrew. I think as our headline on News at 10 on Monday, I think our presenter Tom Bradbury read out, what do you do with a problem like Andrew?
That is the question now, isn't it? Because I think you can see from this that he must believe that there is a role for him in public life, while members of the royal family, very senior members of the royal family, think that there is not. So what does Prince Andrew do next?
Good question. What does Prince Andrew do next? Answers on a postcard. Ask us on Twitter. Although I think if I ever look at my Twitter comments about Prince Andrew, they're never very flattering about him, and most people think that he shouldn't ever come back into public life. We should point out here that Prince Andrew always denied the allegations that were made against him by his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, and he settled out of court with her, which is how most civil lawsuits settle in the United States, without any admission of liability whatsoever. So that was an interesting day on Monday. What about, the Queen obviously didn't make Monday, and she hasn't thus far made day 1, day 2, or day 3 of Ascot, has she?
No, and we've had the carriage list through for today, Friday, and had the list through. The Cambridges are in the carriages today, their first day attending this year, but the Queen is not expected to be there.
Actually, today's day 4, isn't it? Friday?
Today's day 4, yeah. Today's day 4.
So the Queen's not made any of the 4 days,
No.
which
but she has had at least one runner, if not more, every day. Although not having had.
Well, I bet on the runner on Wednesday. It didn't do me any good. I lost my money.
She had 3 yesterday. I think her best placing was Reach for the Moon, who placed second. But she's still waiting for a winner this week at Ascot.
So if I bet each way on Reach for the Moon yesterday, I might have got some money, but I bet each way on that horse on Wednesday when we were there. I don't know whether anyone saw that we had the whole top hat on in the royal enclosure at Ascot. Lizzie was wearing a hat and dress, I believe.
I was, yes.
As the dress code states, it's quite a complicated dress code, isn't it? For the tails and the hat, and it's like I would always have a mild panic every year at Ascot. I don't have all the right bits and pieces that you need. It's quite a lot of stuff that you need.
We had a really lovely day though. It was beautiful weather and an amazing view over the racetrack. So we were very lucky to go.
Yes, I didn't actually get any winnings. Did you win anything?
Oh, I had one winner and a couple that were placed, so I didn't do too badly.
Oh, okay, that's not too bad then. It's better than I did. So, but yes, it was. It's always a fine event to go to, Ascot, isn't it? And the crowds were pretty huge. It was nice to see the race event back in its full form. That was the first one, isn't it, since COVID? It ran last year, but I don't think any people went.
And the Queen has 3 runners today, so she'll be hoping one of them wins, I suspect. Just Fine, Discretion, and Spring is Sprung.
Those you better get down today. The bookies and place a bet on that.
Just Fine was the one that was supposed to get Epsom in that penultimate race on Derby Day, but didn't end up running.
Yeah. Oh well, it's not the Queen's year so far. Well, as we record this podcast, there has been no winner at. No winner at Ascot. Were there no horses running at Epsom in the end?
None ran all day on Derby Day. None
on Derby Day, at least. Yeah. So anyway, the weather's good. We haven't seen the Queen. We haven't seen Prince Andrew actually either. We've just seen quite a lot of Charles and Camilla this week. They've been at Ascot. They obviously were at the Garter Day. William and Kate as well have been out and about. And William and Kate have got a move on the cards from Kensington Palace to Windsor, kind of following what Harry and Meghan did.
So this has been speculated about for a while, that William and Kate are going to move to Windsor, and the children are going to move to a school near there. We now know that they're going to move into what's called Adelaide Cottage on the Windsor estate.
How many more cottages are there in the Windsor estate that I don't know the name of?
It's a lot, aren't there? But they will be obviously much nearer the Queen. And the children in September will all go to a school. The Charlotte and Georgia, St Thomas's in Battersea, and Prince Louis is at Wilcox Nursery. They will all start at a school together near the Windsor estate in September.
Is it the same school we think they're all going to?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, even though Louis is very young, he can go from age 4, I suppose, doesn't he? Start school at 4, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's quite a big move for them. But their office stays at Kensington Palace, but William and Kate shunt off to Windsor. Presumably, they also keep Am Hall in Norfolk. So that's quite a lot of properties they've got amassing around them.
Yeah, Kensington Palace will remain the sort of
office,
the office base. Amma, we know how much they love Norfolk and being at Amma Hall. They are going to retain that. But according to The Sun, their move to Adelaide, they are not going to need to do any work to it. It's recently been done. They're not going to move in any staff with them.
Therefore, they avoid any controversy like Harry and Meghan had about how much was being spent and who paid for it.
Yeah, it's four bedrooms. It was built in 1831 for Queen Adelaide, and it was using building material from Royal Lodge, which is where the Yorks live now.
Oh, they've got a link that they can always pop over and see Prince Andrew to explain why William thought that he shouldn't be at Garter Day if they have a quiet afternoon.
Yeah, they'll all be nearby. and they will be very near to the Queen, obviously, being in Windsor.
Well, of course, and quite near to Harry and Meghan, were they to come across to the UK again, and were they to stay in their official UK residence, which remains Frogmore Cottage, which is also on the Windsor estate.
Yes, and there was a story recently, wasn't there, that they'd renewed the lease on that, but they'd always said that they wanted to retain Frogmore as their UK base.
We have a right old family tea party. What did Meghan call it? A backyard garden party.
Yeah, and talking of family,
but the Beatrice and no, not Beatrice, Eugenie and James Brookbanks have gone off to Portugal for his job. So Jack. Eugenie, Beatrice, Jack, James, all the same.
But talking of family,
their child is called
August. To the Middletons. Middletons live in Bucklebury, which is in Berkshire, so they'll be closer to Kate's family as well. We know Kate and William and the children, they're very close to the Middletons. So I'm beginning to think we should just move to Windsor.
Well, yeah,
Given that's where
everyone's going
they
to be
all
there,
are.
Queen, William and Kate. I
Yeah.
mean, if Charles and Camilla move to Windsor, we might as well just get a house there ourselves. So.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, move the Royal Bureau to Windsor.
So the Royal Bureau next week moves not to Windsor, but to Rwanda for the week. We are doing some filming for another ITV programme over the weekend, which will bring you more news of. We think it may or may not involve some form of mammal in Rwanda somewhere. We will keep you posted on that. And then next week, Prince Charles arrives in Rwanda. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is kind of very much all about the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit, or the word CHOGM, which you might hear a lot, CHOGM, Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. And we will have a Royal Bureau in a part of Africa that not only we have never been to, but no royal has been to before.
So as Chris says, yes, we will bring you next week's podcast from Rwanda, and we'll see you then.
Bye now.